Welcome, everyone out there in the listening audience, to our regular morning broadcasts on Kabbalah for Heretics. With me, of course, your host, Yakov, Leib, HaKohain. I'm delighted of the records that YouTube keeps that there is an ever-growing number, a really rapidly growing number, of those of you out there listening in the radio audience and subscribing to these broadcasts. Thank you. Thank you so much. As always, let's begin by reciting the prayer for the dead in honor of our departed friend, Leonard Cohen. We'll be doing this for the next year, every morning, which is traditional. Yiskadal v'yiskadach shmei rabo, Bomo divro chirusei v'yamlech malchusei, V'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei l'chol beis Yisrael bagalo uvizman, Korev imro amen. Yehei shmei rabo meverach le'olam omel mayo, Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ah v'yisamham, v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisalei v'yisalau, Shmei d'kutsha b'richu, le'olam menchal v'yirchasa v'shirasa tushvachasa v'nechemasa, Damiron Bomo v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabbo min Shemaya, V'chayinu aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei Shalom v'imamov, Hu ya'asei Shalom, aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'imru amen. Again, welcome all of you in the listening audience. We have, for the past 20 plus years, every morning at this time, been studying the Zohar, volume by volume, page by page, sentence by sentence. And having done that, we have, as many of you know, completed, cover to cover, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and are now well into finishing volume 4. Before we continue with the subject at hand in the Zohar, and because it is so jarring, because the content of what's being discussed in the Zohar here is so counterintuitive and challenges what we believe, because of that, let me say a few words about the authority of the Zohar itself. Let me just say a few words about that. By Hebrew tradition, 4,000 years of tradition, God gave Moses the Torah on Mount Sinai in two forms. The written Torah, which we call the Old Testament, or the Bible, and the oral Torah, which God instructed Moses not to write down, but to convey orally from generation to generation, thus preserving their secret teachings. There are those who challenge that idea and who say, if it ain't in the written Bible, it ain't Bible. Well, but that's not true according to 4,000 years of Jewish tradition. It may not be acceptable to you in Christian tradition, as it wasn't to my friend, the priest, who said that to me. He said, there is no oral Torah. Never was, until he said the 3rd century, when it was created out of thin cloth. To which I said to him, but there is an oral teaching in the Roman Catholic Church, is there not? He said, yes. I said, are you then saying that the Catholic oral teaching is correct and valid, and the Jewish oral teaching is not? He said, that's right, that's what I'm saying. I might doubt that for those skeptics who say that it never existed, we see clear references to it in the New Testament. I won't go through those now. I've gone through them many, many times. We see them clearly. Paul makes them. The other evangelists make them. Jesus makes them. As would happen in his own lifetime. He would make oral references to the oral Torah for his listening fellow Israelites to understand The Gentiles standing around listening, if there were any, would not understand what he was saying because they were not privy to the oral Torah. So for 4,000 years, the oral Torah has existed equal in authority to the written Torah. You have to understand that. Among the Jews for 4,000 years, the oral Torah, which they conveyed orally from person to person, and finally in written form in 300 AD, was equal in authority to the written Torah. The oral Torah now consists of two branches. The exoteric, the Talmud, that's the exoteric, mostly exoteric version of the oral Torah, and the esoteric oral Torah, which is the Zohar. When we speak of the oral Torah, we are speaking of both of those primarily, but there are other volumes of oral Torah. Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, which we have been studying for many years, is another source of oral Torah, as well as others. What you must understand, you may not want to agree with it, you may want to disagree with it, but what you must understand is that what we teach here from the Zohar, the oral Torah of the esoteric oral Torah, the Zohar, is for 4,000 years among the Jews equal in authority to the written Torah called by the Gentiles the Old Testament. Equal. So we're not reading in the oral Torah somebody else's opinion, some rabbinical opinion. That is not what we're reading. We are reading a secret, hidden aspect of the written Torah that was given to correct and deeply explain the teachings of the written Torah. There are intentional errors in the written Torah. And we are told over and over again in oral Torah that the Messiah will correct those errors when he comes. Over and over we're told that. I've gone through an inventory of quotations from oral Torah concerning that. In some ways, the oral Torah is the user's guide to the written Torah. In many ways, now listen to me, in many ways it contradicts the written Torah. And that's what it's there for. That's why it should be kept secret, we're told, until the Messiah comes. And by the way, I am not the Messiah, but Messiah has come, at least with the coming of Yeshua bar Miriam, and certainly with the coming of Sabbatai Zevi. So we are now not only privileged to teach the secret teachings of the oral Torah to everyone, Jew and Gentile, but actually required to. So oftentimes and I'll always point it out, what we see in the oral Torah in a way contradicts what we see in the written Torah, or at least explains it. Let me give you a classic example. The self-proclaimed biblical scholar, the armchair scholar, who thinks he knows more than he or she does, will always say, now wait a minute. If there was only Adam and Eve and their two sons, Cain and Abel, in paradise, where did all the other people come from after they were expelled? I'm sure you've heard that. People think they're so clever when they say that. All they're doing is displaying their ignorance of the oral Torah. Now listen, the oral Torah tells us, and now remember this is equal in authority to the written Torah. It explains to us that Cain and Abel had sisters with whom they had children. So the very beginning of the world was in incest, by the way. incest which was made again permissible by Sabbatai Zevi. I hope I'm not going too fast for those of you in the listening audience. So the oral Torah is very clear. It wasn't just Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. It was Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, and their sisters with whom they had sexual intercourse and by whom they had children. Now we see that clearly discussed in the Zohar and elsewhere in the oral Torah. You don't see it in the written Torah because it isn't meant to be in the written Torah. God intended that particular refinement to be in the oral Torah. Also, it says that it clarifies something that's said in the New Testament. In the New Testament, in one of the epistles, I think it's the Epistle of Peter, it says that Cain killed Abel by cutting his throat. Now listen to me. In the New Testament, in one of the epistles, I believe of Peter, it says Cain killed Abel by cutting his throat. Let me point out something to you. Absolutely nowhere in the written Torah does it say anything like that. All it says in the written Torah is that Cain killed Abel. So that the author of that epistle in the New Testament had to have information from elsewhere about the fact that he did it by cutting his throat. And what do you think? Right in the oral Torah it says, and Cain picked up a stone and threw it at Abel's throat and cut it. That's where the author of the epistle in the New Testament got the idea that Cain killed Abel by cutting his throat, thus proving the existence of the oral Torah at the time of Jesus and afterward and before. Am I being clear? Can you hear that? Can you hear that? Clearly, the author of that epistle was writing what he wrote out of his knowledge of the oral Torah at the time. Because the oral Torah indeed taught that Cain cut Abel's throat. But it was not to be found in the written Torah. Therefore, the fact that the author of that epistle mentions it means he had to be aware of the oral Torah at the time, proving that it existed long before 300 A.D., proving that it existed before, during, and after the time of Jesus. I hope all this is sinking in. Now, you're going to find most Christians laughing at this and rejecting this because in so many ways the oral Torah tears down all their false interpretations of the Old Testament with regard to the divinity of Jesus. That's why. They cannot accept the oral Torah because the Gentiles who stole the church from the Jewish disciples, had no knowledge of the oral Torah as the Jewish disciples did. And so they built this false edifice upon only the written Torah. And that false edifice, particularly the divinity of Jesus, the man, is absolutely torn apart and contradicted by the oral Torah. And in consequence, they deny the possibility of such an oral Torah. That's only one reason. The other reason is they don't know it. And there are people, you know it as well as I, who, when they don't know something, deny that it even exists. If I don't know of it, it doesn't exist. That's another Christian reason for denying the oral Torah, including the Zohar, which we're studying here. It also tears apart their idea of replacement theology. That is to say, the Gentiles have built this replacement theology that the Jews are this is according to Gentile Christians now, the Jews are no longer Israel, that the Gentiles, through Jesus, are now the new Israel. Well, that's clearly not so, not only in the written Old Testament, but even more particularly in the oral Torah, where the eternity of the Jewish people as the house of Israel and the necessity of the Jew to bring the Gentile into that house of Israel, not for the Gentile to steal it from the Jew, but for the Jew to bring the Gentile in, is clearly discussed. Of course they don't want to acknowledge the oral Torah. And there are many Jews who are uncomfortable in their assimilation to the Christian world with the kinds of assertions that are made in the Zohar and the Talmud, and would rather they not even be there because it rocks the boat. They like it the way it is now because they've learned to assimilate to it and to accept that that's what the Christians believe, and so forth. And they don't want to be in the position of contradicting the Gentile Christians. God forbid. I don't know if you understand. And let me tell you something. A couple of 100 years ago, which is not very long ago, I would be executed for the very things I'm saying right now. It was absolutely forbidden and punishable by death to speak against the New Testament and so forth. The medieval kings would often hold these debates between a great rabbi and a great church authority. And of course it was rigged, as our friend Trump would say, so that the rabbi would never win. But in the one or two cases they did, and they convinced the king that they were right and the priest was wrong, the rabbi was executed. That's a matter of history. I'm not making that up. The sad history of Christianity and Judaism and the oral Torah. Now, I'm taking this slight departure from the actual contents of the Zohar to talking about the Zohar, so you can understand, those of you in the listening audience who are new to these broadcasts, so you can understand the power and authority of what is being taught here in the Zohar, particularly when it contradicts what you have always been taught. So many people will say, I never heard that before, when I'm teaching from the Zohar. I never heard that before. And what they really mean is, that couldn't be right. I've never heard it before. That's what they mean. They don't mean, I've never heard it before. What a wonder to hear it now. That's wonderful when it's said in that way, but that is not the way most listeners who say it mean it. When they say, I've never heard that before, they mean, so therefore it cannot possibly be correct. Please God, those of you listening in the radio audience who perhaps have that reaction are not having it in that negative way, but are having it in a positive way. I never heard that. I thank God that I'm hearing it now so that I can understand it. Please God. Well, I hope this review of what the oral Torah, and particularly the Zohar, is, and the authority of it. This is not just fairy tale and opinion. It is, by 4,000 years of tradition, the oral Torah given side by side with the written Torah by God to Moses, and passed down from the time of Moses orally until around the 3rd century A.D., possibly later, where it was finally set down in writing. I hope this is helpful to all of you. In the meantime, let me end the broadcast portion of this morning at that point. And as I keep saying, those of you in the listening audience are welcome to attend these recording sessions if you have any comments or questions about what I'm teaching. And there are a couple of people here now who are here for that reason. So let me ask those of you who are here because you might have had comments or questions. If you have any comments or questions, raise your hand now. They may not, by the way, listening audience. All right, that's fine. No one seems to this morning. Other mornings there are. Again, those of you in the listening audience who would like to ask questions and make comments are more than welcome to attend these recording sessions where you can ask them of me personally, not by email, but personally, and I will answer them personally. So let me end now our broadcast for this morning. Please, Almighty God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Blessed Trinity who is in the Zohar. The Trinity is in the Zohar. Please, let them hear not my words, but thy words. Let them follow not me, not themselves, but you. And let them understand thy words, not my words. For what you intended them to mean, not what they misinterpret them to mean. Amen. Amen. Go in peace. This morning's broadcast is over. Thank you. That ends the program. Yishai, thank you for recording it. Thank you guys for being here. Have a great day, a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Yes, indeed. Saturday morning. See you then.